you both. This is a live 45-minute webinar from Accounting Web, and it's brought to you in association with Iris. My name is John Stockdyke. I'm the editor-in-chief of Accounting Web, and with me today to talk about the advisory relationship and the business between businesses and clients is Murray Pullen, the founder of ZooZme, and James Griffin, who's the Director of Product Management for Iris's Cloud Division. I'll introduce the guys to you in a second, and just to let you know, this is an interactive event. It forms part of a long-term project with Iris to really get behind what's going on between accountants and their business clients. We've sort of exploring the relationship from all angles, which we've done through a survey. I will give you a few introductory points on the research that we'll then use to sort of talk about those problems. We think one of them, the term we use, is there's compliance phobia. That's amongst the clients, that then puts a lot of practitioners into a sort of tax-driven rut. So we're going to maybe, that's where people don't want to live. So Murray and James will give some advice there. And the main bulk of this will be all around shifting from the sort of compliance-focused type of practice to much more proactive advisory roles. And Murray is a very good representative of that. Murray also was involved with our business zone colleagues in several ways, including a webinar like this. So he's really actually talked to small business owners about their thoughts. And the one point I would make before I introduce our panelists is that we want as much as possible for this to be an interactive session. So I'll put a few questions to Murray and James and have a few of my own ideas based on the survey findings. But we really want to hear from you, and if you've got a question that you want to put to either or any of the panelists, type it in the bottom of the box of the Cover It Live window on the landing page where you're watching this event, and we'll try and pick those up as we go along and answer your questions. So as I say, that's enough from me for the moment. We'll get back to the survey results in a second, but I'd like to introduce my fellow panelists here. On the middle there is Murray. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, Murray? Your whole, about ZooZme and the basic concept of your firm.
Yeah, thank you, John. So I set ZooZme up in 2011. It was set up as a project, really, to do a bit of research into the accounting market. I was working in the software industry at the time, and saw this as an opportunity for me to go back to my accountancy roots. There was a huge shift, I could see a huge shift in what small businesses were saying to me about their accountants. Necessary evil was one which really sticks, and I wanted to prove that accountants do not need to be that necessary evil that these small businesses were talking about. So I went down the approach of looking at a support model, something which is more advisory, more supportive, with technology in the background, the technology there to cover compliance. So ZooZme was born off of that ethos, really, and that's where it seems that the market is shifting quite quickly now.
Okay, well, brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, and again for all the efforts you've sort of put in on this whole project. We'll explore how you do that in practice and pick your brains for ideas. But first, we want to get on to James. There, can you tell us about your role with Iris, James?
Afternoon, John. Yes, so I'm the Director of Product Management here at Iris, and I'm responsible for the cloud products and services that we deliver to accountants and small businesses. So most of the viewers will probably be familiar with Kashflow, which is a product that my team look after, build and develop, as well as other cloud products such as Iris OpenSpace, which allows accountants to share documents with their end customers.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much also for sponsoring this whole campaign and sort of project. It's a very, I should actually point out as well, James, I mean, this is we really like the way Iris has brought both business zone, accounting web, factual survey, factual data from the survey to sort of expose the problem, and then following it through with conversations like this with Murray. And I should also mention for listeners that out of the back of the project, Iris is putting forward a bunch of go-to advisor guides. And so again, when you've heard this webinar and you want to, maybe you're inspired by Murray's example and you want to get ideas on how to do these things, every month Iris and Accounting Web are putting out one of these guides, and it will sort of try and anticipate the kinds of issues probably looming up for your clients in the next month or two. So try and hit them with advice at the point that that they need it is one of the concepts. But again, we'll talk more about it at the end. It's survey time, and it'll be a very short overview of the of just the main points that emerged from the survey. This was carried out simultaneously amongst Accounting Web members, practitioners, and business owned members who are actually the small businesses themselves. We got a total of 300 responses, so we think that gives us a representative enough sample to make some conclusions. The whole point of the long-term IRIS project and the survey was to try and understand the relationship between accountants and their clients, possibly where there might be functional or communication gaps. And again, by having brought them to the surface, we then want to look at practical ways we can actually do and things we can do to improve that relationship. The initial finding I'll probably highlight is that actually the relationship's pretty good. If you add the 38% who view their accountant as a business mentor with the 15% who say they're really interested in the client's business, that's a majority of these are results from the business respondents. That's pretty positive. There is a strong bond and advisory aspect to the relationship. There are others, 40% nearly, who fall into the we meet once a year at sort of for the final accounts and tax return. Again, that's quite high, but there's a lot of, maybe with a lot of contractor clients, we note it's such a straightforward relationship sort of around an individual that they're not going to be able to grow beyond the services they supply. So that's one aspect. The one less impressive number is that nearly 10% of accountants, their clients, think they have no idea what the firm does. So that's not an impressive number, but I think probably not many of those people are in this webinar today. The other absolute key point that emerged is what the typical business client wants is proactive advice from their clients on things like business strategy and how to grow. They want more direct communication and collaboration with their clients. So that total comes to 61% want some kind of engagement, direct engagement with the client. There's a impressive number of group at the far end of the channel. That's the sort of probably the ones we talk about as the pathfinders, where the client loves what they're doing and they just say everything's great. Hopefully, Murray, maybe some of those people are your clients, and we'll hear how you make them respond like that. And just to highlight what's maybe holding the profession back, we have 6 out of 10 business people want advice, but that 19%, only 1 in 5 accountants, prioritizes as that's the main thing they want to do next year. And again, the thing that stands out is when the accountant says what they want most next year is their client to bring them the tax and the accounts information more quickly. So that the problems accountants experience at tax season seem to be pinning them down and stopping them from maybe satisfying what clients really want, which is deeper involvement with the business and on business advice. So Murray, I'll just I hope you guys, can you guys see my screen okay? I seem to have lost something there on the screen. So Murray, do those findings surprise you?
I was a little bit surprised by what the accountants were saying. In this day and age, compliance isn't something that accountants should be worrying about. There are software solutions out there that are there to help, and I think it's more about listening to the customers. There seems to be a massive communication gap between the clients and the customers, and what we've been trying to do is close that. We've been listening, and we've been listening for years to create the model that we've created, which is more on that advisory, regular contact with our customers, and compliance for us is not our biggest issue. What we want to do is get more involved with our clients' businesses. For other accountants out there to be still stuck in that compliance focus area is actually very concerning for the accounting industry, and I think what we'll find over time is that if accountants remain focused on compliance, they will end up losing customers because it's really not what their focus is on. So it is time for a bit of a shift.
I mean, Murray, the results, were just a sort of statistical overview. They've kind of helped us to confirm or identify that there is a bit of an issue here between the sort of expectation gap. But you were involved with the equivalent webinar like this on Business Zone, where they were telling you probably about what they wanted from their account. What kind of insights and experiences did you get from that session?
It was interesting, actually, and I thanked Business Zone for getting me involved with that Q&A session. It went on for 6 weeks, and what we found was there were a lot of how to put it, very basic questions, things that if customers were just looking for a quick answer to something, they could have quite easily found it on Google. However, what we're finding is that when you do look up those simple questions, sometimes you'll come across a forum. It could be your forum, John. I don't know, but it could. There's sometimes some misleading information on there, and all it takes is a phone call to your accountant, who should be able to answer some of those questions very quickly. It was quite apparent that a lot of these people weren't being supported. The sort of questions that were being asked, there wasn't a lot of support in the background. It might have been because they were new startups, but some of them were established, and some of the answers were relatively straightforward.
Yeah. Actually, James, just since you mentioned that, you sort of preempted one of my other survey insights, so thank you very much for that. But there's this historical ethos or mystique almost has grown up around the profession, and it's true, it exists, that they are the most trusted advisor, more than bank managers and lawyers and the like, and it used to be the main rival to that was the man down the pub, the mate down the pub. What the survey found is although I think it was 31% of the small business clients said that their accountant was their first port of call for advice, it wasn't by much. Google came up as second at 24%. And in fact, you mentioned, forums like Business Zone, Accounting Web came third. Were the same. It was 24%. So nearly half people are of small businesses are going to the internet first, and that's kind of a danger. If that trend continues, that does shake one of the real sort of comfortable assumptions of accountants that's prevailed for years and years and years. So, James, you've been very patient over there, and I'm butting in with all my insights. What were the main conclusions and that you drew from the survey results?
So there were a couple of pieces, actually. So firstly, I wasn't surprised by the findings, actually. One of the great benefits of my role is I get to go and talk to SMEs, and I get to go and talk to accountants and try and find common areas. So this is, the struggle with compliance, but then the sort of desire to do more collaboration with the customers is pretty much at the core of everything we're building here at Iris. We're spending millions of pounds on developing solutions to these pain points. So definitely wasn't surprised to hear it. And the interesting piece that came out of it for me was this man down the pub component. When I think about some of the areas that are affecting business, great, you're going to get advice down the pub, but if you took auto-enrollment, where the consequences of getting that wrong are fines, adverse publicity. You really don't want to be getting advice from a guy down the pub on that. And our own research sort of showed that the SMEs want to turn to their accountants. So there were some real common areas for me that really highlighted the need for a good professional business advisor that's going to help these small businesses navigate these fairly big compliance issues over and above their day-to-day tax and accounts.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and as I say, I think the sort of strategy you've adopted of trying to publish kind of guidance and suggestions for practitioners, the 6 weeks, a month ahead of when maybe their clients should be thinking about them, is part of that the need to sort of not just serve the client and their deadlines, but to anticipate the things that are going to come and bother them. But I think maybe that's my suggestion, but maybe we need to hear it from Murray. Before we do, I know you don't like to waste too much time worrying about compliance, Murray, but what is your explanation for why the six out of 10 clients want business advice, but only 2 out of 10 practitioners are putting that at the top of their agenda? Can you got any explanation for why that discrepancy?
It's again, I think it's that communication. I think that there's this approach in the accounting market where accountants are seen to be just compliance people, and that may have been, that may be in the way a few years back, but times are changing. If the accountancy practices haven't looked around and seen some of these shifts that have been going on over coming years, over the last couple of years, then that will explain why this gap still exists. Small businesses are becoming more savvy. They are looking around, they are finding information. The internet, is a well-used resource, and a lot of them just get on with it. That does lead to its own problems, as we know, especially around compliance, like James mentioned. There are penalties for getting it wrong. I think the advice comes from those small businesses that know and trust their accountant, and they know that their accountant knows their business and knows that they have time outside of the compliance to answer those questions. They're the small businesses that are going to really lean on their accountant for that advisory service. But the accountants have to make it clear that they can fulfill that duty, and I think it's imperative that they do start to make time to do that.
I mean, James, the figure I pointed out as I just gave the overview of the results was that 42% of the practitioner audience were worried about getting the tax and accounts information back from their clients. So they've told us pretty clearly, I think, what's dragging their attention away from maybe their more proactive ambitions. Can you suggest, what's Iris's suggestion or solution for trying to streamline that information gathering and give clients more time for advice?
Yeah, I think it's calls for everything. We do actually. So the entire product offering is built around simplifying parts of the process, but that bit where the client is effectively now in control of the compliance process, because you're waiting for them to approve documents. They turn up in your office on the 29th of January with a bag of receipts and expect you to make a coherent financial picture. We've sort of focused a lot of development effort on removing that pain. So just little simple things such as being able to receive a tax checklist for next year's tax information digitally, so it's ready to populate the return, or sending the approval for the return to the client digitally so that they can approve online, and then it updates the practice software to say that's approved and these numbers are final. To sort of remove that process where in a lot of practices I've observed, the returns, all the draft accounts get printed out, they get sent to the post room, they get put in an envelope, they get sent to the client, they come back, and that's the sort of latter part of the process is completely at the mercy of the client, and then finding it in their mail and reading it. And we're very strong advocates of using the cloud and the digital tools available to just completely shorten that process and make sure it's controlled. And we're seeing lots of accountants adopt that as a new way of working.
Murray, what techniques do you find are most effective at extracting the data that you need from your clients?
Well, we work with Kashflow, so all of the business data, all the financial data, is sitting on the cloud. For us, it's a portal that we can access as well as our clients, so we can pull that information out very quickly. We can also update it ourselves if we know that there's adjustments that need to be made. We can actually do it there and then for our clients to keep everything up to date. Again, going back to what James said, that it's the end part of the process which is at mercy. In terms of the client risk of things not getting done on time, it does often sit with the client. And although they say that things are submitted on time in the survey results, we know that what's in time for us to do the work may not be their perception of in time for them might be on the deadline day, but we know that there's work to be done, and we can fall short of meeting those deadlines. That doesn't happen at our end because we work in a way, we use the Iris solutions, and we collaborate with our clients very effectively on the cloud. Everything's a digital signature. Mm-hmm. Just needs a click of a button. There's no stuffing things in envelopes. There's no posting. It's all done on that digital platform. So we try to avoid those compliance needs. Our focus tends to be on working with our customers rather than looking at the compliance. Again, we heavily rely on technology to fulfill the compliant needs of our business, and it makes life a hell of a lot easier for our practice.
I'll pick you up on that very shortly about moving on a little bit, but we have a question from the Cover It Live feed. Someone wants to know, how long did it take you before you started using all your software properly, Murray?
I was running a consultancy business before I started doing the accountancy practice. I qualified as an accountant in the early 2000s, but I focused my efforts on other things, and that it was because of the nature of accountancy at the time. I started using Kashflow in 2009, so I've been very aware of its strengths for a long time. But in terms of putting everything together with all the solutions that we work with Iris, it was just over a year ago where we strung together the series of products to allow us to collaborate and engage with our clients more effectively. And it's all pretty much done through our website.
Excellent. Thank you for that. As I say, James, you possibly have got to the point where maybe you don't have to focus quite so primarily on extracting the information. The compliance machinery is working. This is for both of you, but maybe start with what you've done and the techniques you use, Murray. How do you actually get the client to sort of stop looking and thinking primarily about the deadlines and fines, and to maybe look at the accounts in a new way and think about what they're telling them about what the business is doing and what it could be doing? How do you shift their orientation, Murray?
It's all about that engagement. You need to get the small business owners to really get involved with their business in terms of the data in their business. Small business owners would like to be making more decisions on a more regular basis, and with that they need information. The information sits within their business, and if they use tools like Kashflow, they can keep on top of their business day to day, have the latest view of let's call it pre-qualified accounts, and just use them as a set of management accounts to run their business day to day. By working that way with the customers, the compliance feels like it's getting done all the time. You don't have that surge, you don't have that delay at the end of the financial year, and that desperation to get things done where mistakes can be made. It's all about working with them day in, day out, and being available, having a support service that meets the client's requirements. It's not a one point of contact just to do compliance. It has to be ongoing.
Okay, James, I'm going to slightly switch track on you here just because another question has come in, and it's apparent that I think this message, probably we are all saying that you need to look beyond the compliance and do more for your business. One of our questioners, certainly amongst the audience, isn't convinced, and they've asked, compliance isn't going away, so why is everyone saying I need to do other things? Do you want to pick that one up? You want to catch that bullet, James?
Why not? Yeah. So absolutely right. Compliance isn't going away, and actually, I look at it in this way. So there's a whole bunch of tools out there today, whether from us or other vendors, that basically takes the pain out of the compliance work. So, if you want to focus your practice on the compliance, because they say, it's not going away, it's still a requirement, then why not do that in the most efficient way and start to use some of the tools, so that at least if you're not going to branch out into other services, that you're at least returning margin through productivity and sort of insulating yourself against the fee pressure. Where the fee pressure is coming from is, you go on Google today and there are fixed fee offerings that to a small business are offering more than just compliance. And we certainly hear feedback from our accountants that that's putting the pressure on that compliance work in terms of billing. So my message there really is, if you are, continuing to just base your practice on compliance, then look at the tools that are available to make yourself more productive and generate some margin. The other component of that is, we're saying it, accounting members are saying it, everybody's saying it, the businesses are saying it, the world is changing. We do want business advice. We want help with some practical problems. So yes, compliance isn't going away, but the need for advice and access to advice for small businesses is the dimension here. Where else are they going to get business advice if it's not their accounting? Because you don't get the advisors in the banks anymore. You remember the small business advisors? You create a business account, they give you a checkbook, and then they give you a business plan. Those guys don't exist anymore. They've been replaced with digital eagles and all, sort of advice on how to get a Twitter account up and running. There's a limited community of business advice, but yet I guess the business climate out there is more challenging than ever. There's more regulation, less funding, more competition, and that's what's driving that demand for more advice.
Murray, I mean, you told us earlier the way your whole firm was founded and structured, precisely to sort of challenge the sort of compliance model that is still probably the majority of the firm. Well, can you tell us, what was the sort of the aha moment, the sudden stimulus that convinced you this is what you needed to do with your career?
It was talking to other businesses. Again, we sat and listened, and it took a few years. It was a part-time project, as I mentioned earlier on, and during those first 3 years where it was a project, it was all about listening to what customers are saying. Going back to the question that James just answered about is compliance going away? No. Your results are based on a subset of the population, and there are people out there that just want compliance done. There's room for everybody in this market. I made a choice that I didn't want to be an accountant that just focused on compliance. I don't particularly enjoy compliance, but I understand that it is needed, and I wanted to make that process as easy and pain-free for me as possible, and I use technology to do that. So I completely agree with James's sentiments about trying to be efficient and more effective. But customers are now asking for, or my customers are putting more stress on me to do more for them, as in the advisory services. So I'm adjusting my model and promoting my business down that road. For me, it works, and your research supports my thinking.
Yep, and dare I say it, you've just also confirmed something that's central to the Practice Excellence program that Accounting Web runs. We've done that too. Probably the strongest message that comes out to that is know your clients. Actually research them the way you have, methodically, even to the point of doing your own surveys and client feedback, and then acting on it, and just that form, as I am assuming that formula works. You give clients what they want, and they buy more of it. So by the way, I'd like to thank. It is a good debate, I think, going on there. We've had a question from a skeptic, but Bryony has also come back and given some very positive feedback for us. So thank you, Bryony. It's everybody's got a voice, but I think James and Murray are certainly giving some great answers and insights from their role. To pick you up, Murray, we're sort of getting towards the end, but I want to sort of we wanted to keep this as practical as possible. You talked earlier about the way you kind of use management reports and the online access and kind of information sharing with your clients. Could you maybe describe, with one of your more switched on clients, what you actually do and how that process works?
Yeah, so onboarding a client is all done via the website. So we can register somebody very quickly. We just need a few bits of basic information, and they get an online portal. When it comes to doing the work, we simply upload their PDF documents to the online portal, which is Iris OpenSpace. We brand it as Boxfile. That's our own spin on it. When we use our own branding colors as well, we can do that as well. And it sends notifications to our clients to do something. At their end, they'll receive an email with our branding on it. They know it's from us. And they simply follow the instructions, click on the accept button to approve the document, and we get a notification back to say that the document has been accepted. It's at that point where we then do the next stage, which is filing it with Companies House or HMRC. So it's very hands-off. There's no posting. We are paperless. We are a paperless practice. The only paper we have is our business cards and the letters that come from HMRC, and that's it.
What about giving them information or to identify problems or opportunities, and again, where you start nudging, helping them to find, the new directions for the business? How do you conduct those exchanges of information?
So the first port of call there is understanding where that business is looking to go. It's not about understanding the business, it's understanding the people behind the business. Accountancy nowadays is not a numbers business, it's a people business. And so we get to know the people behind it, and with that relationship we can then understand what motivates the people behind the business. We've got the same access to the accounts as the customer, so at any point in time we can log in and we can identify areas of opportunity or areas of concern, and the people that subscribe to management accounts with us receive a comprehensive report which gets uploaded to their Boxfile account for them to read at their leisure, along with some commentary that goes with it. That really, more often than not, it encourages them to contact us for further explanation, or do they need to do something to mitigate some risks that may have been highlighted or some issues that might be within the business. It's a very effective way of engaging and collaborating with that business.
Excellent. The questions, by the way, I've got about 3 more. I'll actually probably park them for 4 or 5 more minutes, just so we sort of wrap things up a little bit, and then there will be. I'll put them back to you guys during the Q&A session, and might want to ask you in a second, Murray, about specific areas or even industries where you specialize. But James, can you, from your conversations with other firms, can you give us examples of other kinds of advice, maybe away from the management, accounting, and strategy type discussion? What other areas do you see successful firms really making a good fist of proactive advice?
So there's a couple of hot topics right now. So I mentioned it earlier, but auto enrollment and how to navigate that is, we're seeing some really successful practices building new revenue streams and really helping their customers navigate they're doing that in a couple of ways actually. Some of them are partnering with IFA firms so that they can broaden out the advice on the actual pension configuration. So they're forming an advisory relationship with a local IFA. That's working well for some practices. So that's definitely one real seam of advice. The other piece of advice or advisory sort of is related to some of the things that Murray was saying, where you're sort of taking the real-time data and looking for problems in the business, but then offering some advice. And one of those pieces of advice is around getting paid. So it turns out that small businesses are they're so busy doing business, they're quite poor at collecting cash. And that comes from a number of ways. So some people still take checks. I mean, I haven't got a checkbook. I wouldn't know how to pay somebody with a check. So they're poor at collecting their cash. They're poor at chasing credit control. They don't like doing it because they think it's going to upset customers. So a lot of the accountants we work with are offering credit control services, helping set up payment services, very simply, so that they can add more payment methods into the so what they offer their customers, so they can get paid quickly. So that's quite simple and practical, but really high value to a small business. And those are two really easy areas to start with.
Yeah. James, I must thank you for raising those topics, because strange they happen to be the subjects of the first two go-to advisor guides that people watching this webinar can download from Accounting Web to get a few ideas about how to approach their clients. So you're obviously a very sharp marketing person. I have to thank you for that. Knowing what your audience wants and serving that need, anticipating that need, is a good example. Murray, one of the things that came out of the survey was a lot of firms, even if they call themselves general practitioners, they're all specializing in different industries and areas. Are there, have you got a kind of specialist topic or kind of advice you provide, or do you serve a particular sector, very successfully? Have you got any niches you're working at the moment?
In terms of industries that we're working with, the answer to that is no. We work with any type of business. The idea is that we get to know the people, as I mentioned earlier, and when we engage with them with the Kashflow software, we configure that to their requirements. Even in the same industry, that can vary. It's all down to how that business owner wants to read and understand their own business. From that, we can engage with them. We effectively pull out the reports from Kashflow, and we can get a full understanding of what's going on financially in that business. So we don't really need to be an industry expert. We just need to know how we read and interpret information, and use technology and support small businesses with technology to work with us. So that's more of our niche, is working with the technology.
Excellent. Okay, I think that's a good idea. Maybe even I might return to that if there's time. There's a lot of questions to get through. I think what I'll do is, before we go into the sort of more free-form Q&A, I will just do a really brief recap, and if both you guys are happy, there's enough questions here to keep us talking for another 20 minutes or so. But I'll maybe run it until kind of 10:02 and see if we can get through as many of the questions posted as possible, and maybe we'll try and write a follow-up piece. If we don't cover everything, we'll try and put the questions to James and Murray and fill out. So I have the report from this. We'll try and address everything raised. So the summary I would just say is probably the first principle of business is give your customers what they want. And the survey, and James and Murray have told us that everywhere they've looked and they've seen, businesses want advice. Now, it may not be that comfortable for practitioners who have their way of working and who know what the compliance challenges are, and they are significant. But I think if you look at the situation, if your firm is just based entirely on serving the needs of HMRC and Companies House, you're going to find diminishing margins on that work as everyone else automates and gets, takes care of compliance, but as an adjunct to a wider service. I think, as say James said, that is where things are going, and there are people who don't see that on accounting web. It's going that way. And I think the other thing I would say to some of the skeptics is, your accountants, you're very good at looking at business models and interpreting what the numbers are saying about a business. But maybe it's also time you applied the same rigor to your own business as you do to your clients. And if you were to do that, you would see the need to diversify in different ways. It doesn't have to be, you could just become a payroll specialist doing auto-enrollment or some other aspect. So getting some kind of extra arrows in your quiver is probably likely. That's my summary. Murray, again, before we get to the free-form questions, what single point would you re-emphasize? And just if there's one thing you could tell our listeners what you think they should do, what would that be?
I'd be speaking to my customers. If I could give any advice to anybody running a practice right now, it would be to really get a strong understanding of what your customers actually want. If it's just compliance, stick to what you're doing. But if they want something different, be prepared to make the shift, because clients are getting very frugal. They may have worked with you for years, but if they can see somebody can support them in an area that they're massively interested in, they will move. So it's all about safeguarding your client base. So it's all about making sure that you can communicate effectively with your customer and really listen and act on what they say.
Actually, I'm glad you mentioned that as well, Mary, because I was pushing the advisory line, to the point where people saying, there is still the other stuff they have to do. It's worth noting there are lots of different ways. There are firms out there that we're very aware of who specialize in compliance only, but they're just ultra efficient, and it's a real stack it high and sell it cheap, and it's a margin-based business. And as we see them growing up, they're the price cutters who are possibly, if they continue to grow at the rates we see, they will be winning clients away from the more traditional high street practitioners. So if compliance is your thing, there is a great market for it out there, but it's, again, you're not necessarily going to excite your small business clients by saying you can do their end-year accounts and tax returns for a few quid less. James, what point of emphasis would you make before we get to the free-form questions?
So the main point that strikes me through the discussion actually is most of the questions have really been about the how. So this is all great. You're telling us that our clients want advice, but how do we get there? How do we lead our clients? So the point I would make is, with the technology available today, there are really low impact ways to get started with this and test and see if it works for your practice, and there's help and advice available to help you navigate that without you having to invest lots and lots of money and lots of time to see if this is something that's going to fit with your practice and where you want to take it.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Okay, well, as I say, there's a batch of questions. I'll probably give 5-6 minutes for that, and then we will need to log off, because some people have to get back to their compliance and their advisory work. On the subject of how to do things, Kevin posted a very big issue for just how do you market? It's not Kevin, it's Peter. Although Peter and Kevin, quite similar questions. But how do you market advisor services? Where does that conversation start, and where do you find the businesses that want it? So Murray, what's your technique?
Well, hopefully you've got a client base already, which you can openly communicate to. So first of all, just go out there and simply ask. Either call around or do an email campaign, and you can advertise it internally first. Like most things in business, the most effective marketing tool is word of mouth. And if people know that you're offering advisory services, they've had some good advice and they've acted on it and it's paid off for them, they will talk to other people about it. So I would say the most effective way to go to market is to, first of all, deliver a good service to as many people as you possibly can and hope that they talk about it. That's what's worked for us. We get more work word of mouth than any other form of marketing.
John, can I just come in on that, actually?
Please do. We're just about to go to you, so fire away.
The question was about how do you market the advisory services. I actually think you start a stage before that. Think about how you market your practice and what that stands for. And most of the practices, certainly, a large majority, they carry the partners' names, and that is the brand. So it's important to make sure that that brand is present in every single interaction you have with a client, so that it is your name front and center. So when the word of mouth and the recommendations are taking place, that they know your name. And again, I think what Murray's done really well, if you were to go to his website, you would see ZeusMe. If you were to log into his portal, you would see ZeusMe. If you get a management report from him, you see ZeusMe. If you log on to do your bookkeeping, you see ZeusMe. He's not giving free advertising to software vendors. Every single stage of the interaction, he is branding the experience, and that is really, really important in terms of building brand and loyalty with your customers. And once they trust you and they're established and they keep coming back to your brand, then having and putting new services in front of them is really easy to do.
Excellent. Okay, and where you get into issues to do with marketing, pricing is never far behind, it actually goes. I think if Renee's asked the question, and there was someone else. There's a general question about did you get issues with how you set your prices, Murray? And there's a sort of more detailed one for you in a minute, James, about how the firms who are doing the credit control services, how they charge from it. So if we have a little pricing patch right now. So Murray, how do you approach the issue, the challenge of getting the price right for your client and yourself?
Like all businesses that offer products and services, there is a methodology behind price setting. It's looking at what you value your time as, what materials go into it, and the costs of those services or materials that you use in producing your product. We did exactly that. We broke everything down in a lot of detail and worked out what the annual cost was, and then broke that down by month. So we offer a monthly charge to our customers, which fulfills the needs of our clients. As simple as that.
And James, can you handle that specific one first about the credit control service? How is there a fairly common model for pricing around that?
Yeah, there's a really common model that is kind of related to what Murray was talking about. So how we're seeing people monetize credit control is effectively in a sort of a 2 or 3 tier fixed fee model. So it might be that service A gets you a quarterly VAT return, director's tax return, and a set of accounts at the end of the year, and you pay per month. And package B includes all of that plus credit control, management reports, monthly face-to-face meetings. So it's just about having different tiered offerings and using it as an upsell tool to move them across the fee bands.
Excellent. Okay. Well, I think as I say, we've let this run on a little bit longer than originally scheduled. There's still some great ones coming through. I think the final one is another. It's to do with sort of market profile and ideal clients. I think and if people don't want your advisory service, it comes from Jen, and she says some clients don't want advisory services. Should I get rid of them? Murray, have you faced that situation, and would you pull the lever and tip them out of your ZeusMe chair?
I would never get rid of a customer because you never know when they might want advice. There is a limit. If you are offering advice and customers aren't paying for it, then there's clearly not a relationship that is one of commercial benefit to you as a business owner. It's worth looking at that if that is the case. But I wouldn't get rid of a customer if they didn't need my advisory services. The way that we bundle things together is that advisory service is bundled into our support offering, which is part of our monthly fee anyway, and it is unlimited support. If there's additional work that comes off of it, then we can work out a price for the customer for something more specific. But but general advice is something that is available on the internet for free, although you've got to be careful where you're looking. Why shouldn't it be free from the expert? If they are your clients and they're paying you for a service anyway, it shouldn't be something that comes at too much of a cost.
Yep. I mean, Jen, I will interject here from Accounting Web's perspective through the Practice Excellence program and awards. What has emerged in this year's entrance is that it was a lot more common for firms to sort of prioritize and in almost the same way James talked about the pricing plans. Firms, the top firms much know who they want to serve and who their ideal client is. As I say, I think Murray's a very inclusive and will take a variety of package. A lot of firms will do, but certainly there are some out there who will, the ones who really are chasing profits. If they think the client isn't going to give them value, they will suggest maybe finding another firm which meets their needs better and will do the work for them for less. So that's the lesson from Practice Excellence firms. James, do you want to wrap the Q&A up a little bit with your perspective on kind of client grading and the ideal client?
Yeah, I think it comes down to the individual practice, but what I would say is I agree with Murray. I don't think you should get rid of a client. They will need advice at some point, and the key is to make sure you're serving them as efficiently as you can do in that period, and keep the relationship sticky, so that when they do need that advice, because they will, that you're the first person they call.
Okay, well, as I say, that's we could carry on for another 2 hours, but Murray, you have clients to serve, and James, there's a lot of accountants firms out there, want your software. I really appreciate the time both of you have taken to be with us today and to share some great advice. As I say, I apologize if you posted questions and we didn't have time, but it's just so intense. If you're disappointed about that, or you like some of the ideas maybe you did hear today, there's several resources on Accounting Web that we can help as a follow-up. As I mentioned, the survey, there's an article on Accounting Web with a more detailed explanation. If you search for Cashflow survey, that will enlighten you on much more deeply on what's happening in the relationship. As part of the program, Iris and Accounting Web, we've published 2 guides so far on auto-enrollment and cash control and credit management. And again, that's sort of in anticipation of maybe the end of the year and starting off with a clean slate in next year. So businesses that maybe sometimes struggle over the Christmas and January period with cash, maybe try and anticipate that and help them find solutions so it's not so hand-to-mouth over the holiday period. There's more coming on the sort of management information and strategic advice, and so anticipating, we hope, the kinds of things we think you should be talking to your clients with and when. As I say, if compliance is your bag, stick with it, specialize, automate, and there will be, especially if everyone else is perhaps shedding their least profitable clients, there is a market for that too. So, I mean, that's our lesson: is give your clients what they want, and we know at the moment 6 out of 10 of them want business advice. So again, thank you everyone. That's it for me, and we hope you carry on taking an interest in this campaign. And if I could only ask you to applaud James and Murray, it's been a great morning. So thank you very much, everyone, and goodbye.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.